Today we'll be giving a gameplay overview and review of the game Lisboa, or Lisboa.
Lisboa.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful.
Obrigado.
Oh, he knows some Italian. Hi everyone, I'm Tracy, the Gaming Maven.
And I'm Stephane, the games teacher.
And today we're going to be looking at Lisboa, but are you looking for the setup? Looking to see what the gameplay looks like? Click on a timestamp below.
Leave us a comment and tell us how we're doing, and if you like what you see, subscribe to be notified when we post new content.
And I know I can't wait to get to the gameplay, so let's get to it. In Lisboa, players play influential nobles that survived the disasters that happened in the 1700s, the earthquake and the fires and the tsunami. You're now rebuilding the city and you're influencing the royalty, influencing other nobles, helping to reconstruct the stores and the public buildings, as well as trying to earn the most wigs by the end of the game.
So here we have the components for the deluxe version of Lisboa. To start with, we have the main game board, the decrees board, the 4 player mats, the rubble cube bag, the clergy tile bag, where you have the rubble cubes and the clergy tiles respectively. We have our coin tokens, we have our city tokens. These are our plan tokens, including 4 starting plans. We have our public building tokens. These are our city scoring tokens. Here we have our resource tokens, our royal court tokens. We have our starting player token, cards for the decree stack. We have our ship cards, our player cards in the different eras. Here we have our goods price markers, our treasury marker, our cardinal marker, sets of player tokens in the 4 player colors. Here we have a starting tax deck, which is an optional variant, as well as these tokens, which are also optional, which can be used to randomize the layout of the city area. In addition, we also have in a two-player version, if we're setting up for 2 players, we would have this optional board to cover up the E Street, and then we have the player aid books. We're going to start with the setup for the player area. So each player will get the player mat in their color. You can see from the background here that this is the yellow player mat. They'll each get 10 coins. Real is the singular form and reis is the plural, so 10 reis. They'll get 1 goods marker in each type, so gold, books, cloth, and tools. They'll also get the rubble cubes in their player colors, so 5 rubble cubes. They will get a starting plan. You can tell it's a starting plan because of the blue background border on the plan at random. There's 4 of them in the game, and each player will get 1 to start with. They will get the 8 house markers in their player color and the 8 official markers in their player color. They will also get 2 clergy tiles drawn at random from the clergy tile bag, and they will get to choose one to keep in play. So in this case, I've chosen this one already. They will also get 5 cards from the blue card deck, and over here I have the start player marker. Players are also randomly given a royal favor token, one of the 3 royal favor token colors. I'll just grab one at random for this case. And they go here on the player mat. So now we're going to look at the main board setup. Over on this side we have the decrees board, and we're going to shuffle the deck of decree cards and lay out 8 cards face up for players to choose from throughout the game. We're going to lay out the 4 decks of red cards to start the game. They are the 3 different noble stacks and the treasury cards. Each player will place their courtier token out in the royal court area on one of the spots. They will place their wigs marker at the 5 space of the wigs track, which is our victory points. The remaining royal favor tokens will get played in their appropriate spots. In a two-player setup, a neutral player color is chosen and one of their officials is placed in each of the 3 offices for the 3 nobles. Then each player will place one of their official markers in the Marquis's office. Each player will place their influence markers on the influence track, and the start player will place in the 4 position. Each player will go 1 number higher. We're then going to draw randomly 6 of the clergy tiles, which I've already done from the clergy tile bag, and the cardinal token will start in this position on the church track. The treasury marker will start in the middle position on the treasury track. We're going to lay out the blue boat face up on top with one of the red boats. There are 3 boats in each color, so you randomly choose a blue boat from the 3 that are available and a red boat from the 3 that are available, and we'll place the blue boat face up on top. We're going to randomly set out the scoring markers for the city tokens. We're going to place rubble cubes at random along these spaces and also along the public house spaces around the outside edge. With the 2-player setup, 6 remaining rubble tokens are placed over here as a general supply. We have the goods price tokens, which are laid out according to their icons on the goods track. So gold starts at 6, cloth and books start at 5, and tools at 4. We're going to lay out the top of the public buildings tokens from the blue and the green piles. Now these are double-sided. They are green on one side and blue on the other. So you'll randomize the whole stack and then divvy them up into even piles of blue and green tiles. The blue and green plans are laid out with the lower cost plans on top going down to the higher cost plans on the bottom. We're going to have the city store buildings laid out on the side of the board here. In a 2-player setup, we cover up the E Street or E area with this board because that'll be out of play. And with that, the setup is done. So a couple of things to note. There are 2 types of cards in the game. There are the noble cards in the 3 different noble colors, as well as treasury cards. And what you can do during your turn will depend on which card you choose to play and where you choose to play it. There are 2 places to play either card: to your portfolio, which is your player mat, or to the royal court. Depending on which card you play where will dictate which types of actions you can take. On your turn, you will play a card to either your portfolio or the royal court, resolve any appropriate actions, and then draw a card from one of the available piles to end your turn. So on your turn, your main actions are to play a card, resolve any actions accordingly, and draw a card to end your turn. Now, there are 2 types of cards in the game. We have the noble cards, which come in 3 varieties, and we have treasury cards. We also have 2 different areas where you can play cards. We have the royal court and your portfolio. So which type of card you choose to play and where you choose to play it will dictate what actions you have available to you. In this case, I want to play this treasury card, and I'm going to play it to my portfolio. Now, to do that, I'm going to resolve first of all the action. This little arrow indicates that the card will be played to the bottom of my portfolio, and I'll resolve these actions. The first is to grab income based on the current treasury spot marker. That'll be 3 race added to my supply. And then secondly, we're going to move the treasury marker down 1 space on the track. We're then going to slide this card underneath my portfolio, and this icon indicates an ongoing effect that I have while this card is remained face up. In this case, it reduces the cost of the gray rubble or beige rubble by 1 coin each, 1 race each. Now, having played that card to my portfolio, I now have a few options. The main option that you're going to do in this case is to trade with the nobles. And there's different trade actions we can take. for each of the nobles, and I'll go through them one by one. The first action we can take with Manuel the Builder is to place 2 of our official tokens onto the board into the offices of the nobles. Now I would take 2 from my player mat and I would place them. Now I have to place them in different offices, but I can have multiple officials in a single office. In order to take these actions, I would have to first spend either a gold or a tool resource from my supply. So in this case, I will spend the gold to that area to indicate that I've taken that action. Now I can take a second action if I wish to. It would cost me additional resources. I'm going to indicate what all the actions are, but imagine that I had the resources to spend for them. So the second action available for Manuel is to grab a plan from the plan supply. Now you can take either the blue or the green plan from the top of the stack. And you would simply add it to your plan area on your portfolio. Looking at the Marquis, his 2 trade actions are to build a ship or produce goods. Building a ship, the Marquis wants either gold or books. So again, spending the resources, I would then be able to build the top ship from the ship supply and add it to my player area. Now if we look at the ship card, the first thing that happens here is that we move the treasury marker up 1 on the track, and then we slide the ship. The second thing indicates that we're going to gain influence on the influence track based on the ship. Now, sorry, I'll show this again. The ship card here requires me to spend an additional resource good from my supply in order to get the ship. So then I'll slide it in under here, having spent the resources, and I would immediately gain 3 influence on the influence track. Producing goods is only really available to you after you've built a shop in the city, and I have not done that yet. So we'll get back to that action. The king's trade actions are to move the clergy cardinal token, around the clergy track. So move 2 spaces around the clergy track, and then you would lay claim to either of the adjacent clergy tiles, which will give you some additional options for gameplay over the course of the game. The second action is to grab one of the royal favor tokens. You can choose from any of the 3 nobles. Now you can only have one of each royal favor token, so you cannot take the color that you have already in your supply. In this case, I'm going to grab the king's favor token. And again, the cost for these would be either a gold or a cloth. So another way you can play cards from your hand is if you have a noble card, you can play it to the royal court. And this allows you to then take the action of visiting a noble. In this case, I play the Manuel the Builder card. He will then allow me to take certain actions. So the first thing I can do is to first take one of his trade actions for free. I don't have to spend one of my goods tokens. And in this case, I'm going to choose to get another plan. I'm going to grab the blue plan from the top of the stack. You're not limited as to how many plans you can have in your portfolio. Then I can take his noble action, which in this case is to build a shop in the city quarters. So the first thing I would do is I would select a shop area, a shop from the available shop tiles. And I'm going to go with this one here from brown, which means necessarily I would have to play it on either side of the brown street, but in any of the 4 spaces along the brown street. I'm going to choose to play it here. Now when I play it, I immediately get the bonus which is covered up, so that is to get a brown book token from the supply. And add that to my portfolio. The next thing I need to do is remove a rubble token from either the column or the row where it appears. So either this area or that area. I'm going to choose to remove one of these beige rubble tokens because they are the most expensive ones to pay for. And that rubble token goes into my rubble area on my portfolio. Then I have to pay raise equal to the total value of the treasury markers, so in this case 3 to start, plus any additional rubble left in that area. As you can see from this area on the player board, blues cost 1, reds cost 2, and beige normally cost 3. However, because of my discount, beige only cost me 2. So seeing what's left, I spend 3 plus 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I would spend that back to the supply. And then I would get to place one of my house markers on that shop space. Now, which house marker I choose will get me some additional bonuses based on which houses are uncovered. In this case, when I produce goods, I can choose one good to produce a second unit. For taking any noble action, I would have to first spend influence down on my influence track. So in this case, my influence cost is based on the officials that are in the office of the appropriate noble that I'm visiting. And so I pay 1 influence per official that isn't mine in that noble's office. So Manuel, in this case, I have 1 yellow official. There's 1 green official, so I would pay 1 influence, plus also a modifier of where the treasury marker appears. So in this case, 0 plus one official that is not mine is 1, and I would spend that on the influence track. Having resolved my noble action, my noble visit, now each other player has the option, if they have a marker for that noble, of spending it back to the supply, and they can then follow my action. Generally, we would place our courtiers out on the noble card to say that we have taken that action, and then the player who follows would do the same, and they would then get to follow the noble's action. And what they can do during a follow phase is take any one of the 3 actions that the noble offers. So either one of their 2 trade actions or their noble action. The other 2 noble actions for the Marquis and the King, the Marquis allows you to take a decree from the decree offer, and you can take any of them in any order you wish. So in this case, you might want to grab this decree and add it next to your player board. Decrees are always visible for all players, so everyone knows what you're working towards, and what these do is they provide you with endgame scoring conditions. So in this case, if I have the most stores in the pink street, equal to or more than anyone else, I would earn 5 wigs at the end of the game. The King's noble action is to build a public building. Public buildings go on the outside edge of the city area, so either the west, the north, or the east areas. And you can choose, you need to choose a public building based on the plans that you have available. Now I have both blue and green plans, so I can choose either of the 2 public buildings that are on offer. If I choose, for instance, to use my green plan, this one costs me 2 officials. So what I'll do is I'll turn that over to say that it is completed. I will take 2 of my officials away from the offices, from the nobles, and put them back in my portfolio. I will then choose, because it was a green plan, I will choose to play out this green public building. And I can choose to play it in any of these places. However, having already played a brown shop, it makes more sense for me to play it in an area where that will score, because this one will score for yellow and brown shops. So I could either choose to play it here on the brown street, I could choose to play it over here on the west side of D, or over here on the east side of D. And I will get the appropriate rubble cubes from the place where I choose, and they will get added to my player board. I will immediately get the action, the bonus based on that, which is to get 5 coin from the supply. When you build a store, you will score the WIG score based on the public buildings that are already in play. When scoring for a public building, you score for the stores that are already in play. Another action you can take is to sponsor an event. In order to do that, you will play specifically a treasury card to the royal court. To sponsor an event, you have to pay for it in rays, and what you're going to do is pay the value based on the treasury marker. So in this case 3, and I'll pay 3 coin back to the supply. That allows me to then take the middle action on the treasury card. Now in this case it's either build a building or build a public building, or build a shop or build a public building. Sponsoring an event cannot be followed by another player, unlike visiting a noble. So other players are not able to take that action using the court tokens. The final action you can do requires you to have a ship, and that is to sell goods. Now, as I already have a ship card here, I'll be able to sell goods to the ship. In order to take that action, first I'm going to need to play a card as per the start of my turn. I'm going to play a noble card here, and the action that's covered up here is to get a gold resource from the supply. Now, I'm at my card limit, which is equal or less than 2 cards. Now, so because I have a ship, which is 1 card, the noble, a 2nd card, and I have this previous card from an earlier turn, the 3rd card, I'm going to choose to discard 1. So to illustrate selling goods to the ship, I'm going to discard this card. And the sell goods action allows me to sell goods to the ship, to any ship in fact, not only my own, but to any ship that any other player has, up to the ship's hold limit. Now this ship has a hold limit of 1 good. I can choose to sell any of my goods resources to the ship. So right now gold has a value of 6, and I would sell that. I would get 6 from the supply. Now the player who owns the ship, whether it's you or another player, if that ship's holds are full, and in this case they are, that player will get to flip over the goods resource and score wigs based on the number of goods that are shipped. So in this case, not only did I get money, but because I shipped to my own ship and its holds are full, I will actually get a point. The wig token stays there until the start of that player's next turn, so that more goods can't be sold to the same ship until the start of that player's next turn, at which point this gets discarded back to the supply. So we've talked about selling goods, but how do we produce goods? The goods production action is here under the marquee's trade actions. So having taken that action, you then produce goods based on the stores that you own in the city district. In this case, yellow player owns a store on the brown street, so they would get a book good from the supply, and they'd add it to their resource area. However, because yellow only has a limit of 2 goods and already has 2 books, they wouldn't actually produce an additional one. But imagine they didn't, and we're down to 1 resource. They would add 1 from the supply, and having produced that good, its cost marker will now go down by 1. Resource costs never increase, they only decrease. So every time a given good is produced, their cost indicators will go down by 1 on that track, making them less valuable for future players. At the end of a player's turn, after they've drawn an available card to indicate that their turn is finished, we will then look at the decrees. If there are any open spaces, they are refilled from the supply. Clergy tiles are then refilled from the clergy tile bag. If there are any shops that were purchased during that turn, they are refilled from the supply. And any ships that are face down are then turned face up and made available for the next player to purchase. Over the course of a player's turn, the cardinal token may move around the clergy track, or the church track. If the cardinal token ever gets to this spot on the church track, then we resolve it by moving the treasury token, treasury marker, up 1 space on the treasury track. And if the cardinal token ever makes it to this spot on the church track, then it is laid down, and at the end of that player's turn, we'll resolve a church scoring action. So church scoring, players will look at their clergy tiles that they have on their portfolio, and they can choose to discard any of those clergy tiles in order to score influence points based on the influence shown on their nobles or ship cards. So if I was to discard this tile, then I would get 2 plus 3 is 5 influence, move up on the influence track. And when I reach the end of the influence track, that player would get 1 wig. And anytime they go past the end of the influence track again, they would get an additional wig. That player would then also score wigs for when they turn the clergy tile over. Any clergy tile they discard, they will score wigs based on the amount of the wigs showing on the back of that tile. And the tile goes back in the clergy tile bag. So the period will end when one of 2 conditions are met. Either a player has completed 2 rubble stacks, or 3 of the 4 card offers are depleted. During period end, we will discard any ship cards remaining in the ship offer. Each player will get 3 wigs for each set of 3 rubble cubes they have. So in this case, yellow would get 6. Each player can then discard one of each type of noble, so one builder, 1 marquis, and 1 king, in order to gain the bonus at the bottom of the card. So in this example, I would get 1 tool, and then I would get to draw 2 decrees from the decree offer. Then players can choose to discard any remaining cards from their hand, and then draw back up to 5 cards from the purple deck, which is the deck we'll use in the next era. The cards from the current era are removed, and replenish the offer with the cards from the second era. So endgame is triggered when one of 2 things happen. Either 3 of the card offers are depleted, or one player has reached 4 full sets of rubble. Then each player will add to their current Whig score first the hull value of any ships they have in their portfolio. Next, 3 Whigs for each full set of rubble they have. Whigs for majority of different store types. So if we look at each store type, who has the most yellow stores, the most pink stores, the most brown, the most blue, and they'll score, the most will score 3, the second most 2, etc. down the line depending on the number of players. In a 2-player game, you'll only use the top and the bottom score values. The middle score value is ignored. You will then cash out your influence for race. And then based on the number of race that you have left at the end of the game, you will score 1 Whig per 5 race. You will then earn Whigs based on your decree cards. You will then look at the number of public officials icons on your completed plans, and the person with the most will earn 15 Whigs, second most 10, or in a 2-player game, 5 points. And finally, you'll earn 2 Whigs for each royal favor token you still have remaining in your portfolio. Sorry, 2 Whigs per royal favor token you have remaining in your portfolio. At the end, the player with the highest Whig total wins the game.
So now we're ready to give our review of Lisboa. So, what did you think?
I really like this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Vital Lacerda game. I've loved all of his other games. The only one of his games I believe that I haven't played is CO2. I mean, I know I haven't played CO2, but I think I've played everything else that he's published or produced, designed. So I really enjoy this one, and it might just be my favorite of his games.
Ditto. Although I will tell you that I didn't originally back this as the Kickstarter because I had the same concern that I think a lot of people have. It's blue. As you can see, it's very blue.
It's pretty blue.
So that kind of threw me off. It kind of seemed a little muted. However, when we met with Vital, he kind of explained it, and as an art history buff, it really appealed to me. So I went and looked it up, and I'm like, wow, it really is historically accurate. All that blue is in Lisboa. So I think now I've kind of gone from the it's so blue to, oh, it's so blue because it's blue for a reason. It wasn't just done that way. So I cannot tell you how much I love this game, but we'll go through everything. So, art and theme.
You know, pretty fantastic. There's a lot of detail on the game board.
Yes, there is indeed.
There's layers. If you hear Vital talk about it or you read through the rule book, you know, it describes basically the layers of imagery that are on the game board. And so very thematic. I've never been to Lisbon. But Vital, you know, was born and lives there still, so I imagine he would know. And to hear him talk about this, you know he's taken extra special care to make this game representative of his hometown.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it was interesting, like I said, because I'm an art history buff. I was going to be going to university for art history, and so to learn that all the history behind this, the whole earthquake and the fires and the tsunami, which was, you know, a tragedy, but it was interesting that the whole rebuild process was the inspiration behind this game. So you kind of see it in the building of the city and the influencing of nobles. So the art, it is busy, but you start to see, if you can kind of look at them as, like you said, layers, and not to see it as just this one busy board. It's stuff on top of stuff, and all that stuff is there for a very specific reason. So that's really great. Thematically, I think it actually works really well. You have to decide whether you're going to influence the nobles. You have to spend influence, and you have to go city builds. You have to get resources to build. You collect the rubble, so you're getting rid of the rubble so you can build the city. So it's all very intertwined mechanically. Like the mechanics really intertwine the theme quite well. The one big thing, and I forget what I was about to say. Oh, it bothers me. What was it? Oh, the wigs.
The wigs.
The wigs. That was really cool, that the wigs are your victory points. because the Whigs talked about how rich you were, how influential you were in society at that time.
Right.
So components.
Component quality, we got the deluxe version of the game, and the component quality is, as you would understand, very high. It's not a cheap game, so you get your money's worth with this. I mean, the component quality is fantastic.
Even if you, because I know exactly what the deluxe is, it's like silkscreen tokens and stuff like that. Even if you just look like the player boards, those player boards are standard player boards.
Yep.
Everyone gets those player boards.
Yeah.
So those, like that 3-layer player board, I had no idea until Vital kind of showed you that there's like the layer to put the rubbles on top so they don't fall out, and then the cards can go underneath. So all the iconography really ties together once you see where you're playing cards and why. So it's really quite cool. Those are nice. Everything is high quality, super thick cardboard.
About those player boards, now when we pulled them out of the box the first time, they did start to bow up a little bit. I'm exaggerating. They bowed up a little bit.
Yeah.
However, with a couple of gameplays, they've kind of settled back down. So if you get this game and you look at it and you're like, oh, I got a defect because my player boards are bowing, give it some time, play it, let it settle, and I think over time they'll flatten out pretty good.
And I believe Vital mentioned something about the manufacturing process, changing a little bit to try to fix that with newer versions and newer print runs.
It was a concern I had when we first pulled it out of the box, because I noticed that right away and like, oh no. But then it did resolve itself.
It did. And because you needed the cards to slide down and it actually stops the cards, you kind of don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think it settles down quite nicely. And of course, unfortunately, we live in a city that's extremely humid.
Yes,
so it's going to affect cardboard in a little bit.
That probably didn't help.
No. So we just talked about our game components. Game mechanics.
Game mechanics. So the game has a lot going on. The individual mechanics are fairly straightforward, except how you tie them all together to get a good score may be a little more strategic. In that it's a bit like, and I'm talking about comparable games, another game recently that we played that is similar concept is Lignum, where the individual mechanics are very straightforward, but tying it all together for a strategic outcome and a victory is difficult.
I find I don't have to think like 20 moves ahead with this game, but I still do have to think, okay, I got to do this, so in 3 turns I can do that. So it's not like immediate, like your next turn. Sometimes you do have to think multiple turns ahead to kind of plan for what you're going to do, because you are restricted by, say, card limits or amount of resource tokens you are allowed to have based on how much rubble you've collected. You have to go to trade with the nobles or visit the nobles, but visiting the nobles allows your opponents to do stuff on your turn as well if they
follow
can.
Your action.
So you kind of got to weigh how much you're willing to sacrifice certain things for other things, and how long you feel you're willing to take this strategy along, or get the immediate benefit of other things first. So.
I do like the level of player interactivity in that, as you mentioned, when someone takes a visit a noble action, you can follow their action, and so that you can do something on an opponent's turn. Yeah. And the other thing that I find is somewhat interactive is the building of the shops in the city core.
I was just about to say that.
Because of the way they can play off of each other, and you can build a public building which might score you, but could also give your opponents a score, versus where you place your shops. So it's kind of interactive in that sense.
I agree. Like, when people think of player interaction, they're thinking like direct player interaction, but I think that is like an influential kind of player interaction.
Sure.
Very much so, because you don't want to give them points. You might be giving them a fair number of points by playing so, but you might be restricted by where you want to play it for you. So you gotta balance out, do you want to give them this but get a better benefit for you later, or the immediate benefit is really important to you right now, or you need those particular colors of the rubble, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things to decide what you're willing to give up and what you're willing to get for it. So it's quite cool that way. So similar games, you already mentioned Lignum. Now obviously mechanics-wise...
Thematically and mechanics-wise they're different, but they share that similar, core mechanics are simple, but strategy is complex.
Yes, exactly. Of course, any of Vital's other games have all these layers. So the Gallerist, Kanban is another one where you have all these different spots and you need to go here before you can do this, and you need to be able to collect that before you can do this, but you're restricted by what other players do and where they place. So he really thinks of all these little intricate details that my mind just sometimes is blown by how how all these little things really matter, and if one of those things is missing, the game could be broken.
Yeah.
But it's not missing, it's there, so it's almost a flawless game.
Right. If you're not familiar with Vital's games, and I highly recommend all of them, I've loved every one of them so far.
Ditto.
If you're not familiar with his games, another designer that has similar complexity in their games, I guess, would be Stephane Feld. So I don't know if you played any of Stephane Feld's games, but they often have multiple ways to score, multiple paths to victory. Vital does a lot of the similar things in his games as well.
Yes, for sure. So final thoughts. I think I can guess.
I really love this game. Vital, it's another hit. Thank you, Eagle-Gryphon Games, for sending this copy. It was fantastic. I'm going to enjoy playing this for a long, long time to come.
This is even above the Galleries, because as a person who loves art, the Galleries would normally be my first choice. This is by far my favorite Vital Lacerda game, for the reasons of the game mechanics, but also because of how passionate he was about it, how obviously much he loves his city and designed a game around its history, and just the history and accuracy of the art and everything about the game.
Yeah, we got to interview Vital. I got to interview Vital at Origins this year, and we talked about Lisboa. Sadly, we had to cut the interview a little short because I felt like Vital could have talked for hours about this game of his, and I can understand why. It's a great game.
Yeah.
If you want to hear more on Vital, check out our other video with him in it. And we'll provide a link to that below.
Yeah. And with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.